Law 2. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies. Be wary of friends. They will betray you more quickly, for they are easily aroused to envy. They also become spoiled and tyrannical. But hire a former enemy and he will be more loyal than a friend, because he has more to prove. In fact, you have more to fear from friends than from enemies. If you have no enemies, find a way to make them. Transgression of the law. In the middle of the 9th century, a young man named Michael III became the emperor of the Byzantine Empire. His mother, Empress Theodora, had been sent away to a nunnery, and her lover, Theoctistus, had been killed. Behind the plot to remove Theodora and crown Michael was Michael's uncle, Bardas, a clever and ambitious man. Michael, now a young and inexperienced ruler, found himself surrounded by schemers, murderers, and debauches. In such dangerous times, he needed a trusted advisor and thought of his best friend, Basilius. Basilius had no knowledge of government or politics. He was merely in charge of the royal stables, but he had proven his loyalty and gratitude many times. They had met a few years earlier when Michael visited the stables and a wild horse broke free. Basilius, a young groom of humble Macedonian origin, had saved Michael's life. Michael, impressed by his strength and courage, quickly promoted Basilius from an obscure horse trainer to the head of the stables. Showering him with gifts and favors, they became inseparable. Michael sent Basilius to the finest school in Byzantium, transforming the crude peasant into a cultured and sophisticated courtier. Now that Michael was emperor, he needed a loyal companion. Who could be better suited for the role of chamberlain and chief advisor than the man who owed him everything? Although others suggested the more experienced Bardas, Michael chose his friend. Basilius learned quickly and soon was advising the emperor on all state matters. The only issue was money. Basilius never seemed to have enough. The grandeur of Byzantine court life made him greedy for the benefits of power. Michael doubled, then tripled his salary, made him a noble, and even arranged for him to marry his own mistress, Eudoxia Ingerina. To keep such a trusted friend and advisor content was worth any cost. But more trouble loomed. Bardas was now the head of the army, and Basilius convinced Michael that Bardas was dangerously ambitious. Bardas had helped put Michael on the throne, thinking he could control him and might conspire again to seize the crown for himself. Basilius whispered poison into Michael's ear until the emperor agreed to have his uncle killed. During a grand horse race, Basilius approached Bardas in the crowd and stabbed him to death. Shortly after, Basilius asked to replace Bardas as head of the army, where he could manage the realm and suppress the rebellion. This request was granted. Basilius's power and wealth grew, and a few years later, when Michael, in financial trouble due to his own extravagance, asked him to repay some borrowed money, Basilius refused with such insolence that Michael realized the gravity of his situation. The former stable boy now had more money, more allies in the army and senate, and ultimately more power than the emperor himself. A few weeks later, after a night of heavy drinking, Michael woke to find himself surrounded by soldiers. Basilius watched as they stabbed the emperor to death. Proclaiming himself emperor, he then rode through the streets of Byzantium, brandishing the head of his former benefactor and best friend at the end of a long pike. The snake, the farmer, and the heron. A snake chased by hunters asked a farmer to save its life. To hide it from its pursuers, the farmer squatted and let the snake crawl into his belly. But when the danger had passed and the farmer asked the snake to come out, the snake refused. It was warm and safe inside. On his way home, the man saw a heron and went up to him and whispered what had happened. The heron told him to squat and strain to eject the snake. When the snake snuck its head out, the heron caught it, pulled it out, and killed it. The farmer was worried that the snake's poison might still be inside him, and the heron told him that the cure for snake poison was to cook and eat 6 white fowl. "You're a white fowl," said the farmer. "You'll do for a start." He grabbed the heron, put it in a bag, and carried it home, where he hung it up while he told his wife what had happened. "I'm surprised at you," said the wife. "The bird does you a kindness, rids you of the evil in your belly, saves your life in fact, Yet you catch it and talk of killing it. She immediately released the heron, and it flew away. But on its way, it gouged out her eyes. Moral: when you see water flowing uphill, it means that someone is repaying a kindness. Interpretation: Michael III pinned his future on the sense of gratitude he believed Basilius must harbor for him. Surely, Basilius would serve him best. After all, he owed the emperor his wealth, education, and position. Once Basilius was in power, it seemed wise to give him anything he desired, strengthening the bonds between them. But on that fateful day when the emperor saw that audacious smile on Basilius's face, he realized his grave mistake. He had created a monster. He had allowed a man to taste power, a man who then craved more, who asked for everything and got it, who felt burdened by the charity he had received and did what many do in such circumstances: forgot the favors given and imagined he had earned his success by his own merits. At the moment of realization, Michael could have saved his own life, but friendship and love blind every man to their true interests. No one believes a friend can betray them, and so Michael continued in his disbelief until the day his head ended up on a pike. Observance of the law. For several centuries after the fall of the Han Dynasty in AD 222, Chinese history repeated itself in a cycle of violent and bloody coups. Army men would plot to kill a weak emperor and replace him on the dragon throne with a strong general. This general would start a new dynasty, crown himself emperor, and then kill off his fellow generals to ensure his own survival. However, a few years later, the pattern would repeat. New generals would rise up and assassinate him or his sons in their turn. To be emperor of China was to be alone, surrounded by enemies. It was the least powerful and most insecure position in the realm. In AD 959, General Chao Kuang-yin became Emperor Sung. He knew the odds were against him, and that within a year or two he would likely be murdered. How could he break the pattern? Soon after becoming emperor, Sung ordered a banquet to celebrate the new dynasty and invited the most powerful commanders in the army. After they had drunk much wine, he dismissed the guards and everyone else except the generals, who now feared he would kill them all at once. Instead, he addressed them. "The whole day is spent in fear, and I am unhappy both at the table and in my bed. Which one of you does not dream of ascending the throne? I do not doubt your allegiance, but if by some chance your subordinates, seeking wealth and position, were to force the emperor's yellow robe upon you, how could you refuse it?" Drunk and fearing for their lives, the generals proclaimed their innocence and loyalty. But Sung had another plan. The best way to pass one's days is in peaceful enjoyment of riches and honor. If you are willing to give up your commands, I am ready to provide you with fine estates and beautiful dwellings where you may take your pleasure with singers and girls as your companions. The astonished generals realized that instead of a life of anxiety and struggle, Sung was offering them riches and security. The next day, all of the generals tendered their resignations and retired as nobles to the estates that Sung bestowed on them. In one stroke, Sung turned a pack of friendly wolves, who would likely have betrayed him, into a group of docile lambs, far from all power. Over the next few years, Sung continued his campaign to secure his rule. In AD 971, King Lu of the southern Han finally surrendered to him after years of rebellion. To Lu's astonishment, Sung gave him a rank in the imperial court and invited him to the palace to seal their newfound friendship with wine. As King Lu took the glass that Sung offered him, he hesitated, fearing it contained poison. "Your subjects' crimes certainly merit death," he cried out, "but I beg your majesty to spare your subject's life. Indeed, I dare not drink this wine." Emperor Sung laughed, took the glass from Lu, and swallowed it himself. There was no poison. From then on, Lu became his most trusted and loyal friend. At the time, China had splintered into many smaller kingdoms. When Tian Shu, the king of one of these, was defeated, Sung's ministers advised the emperor to lock this rebel up. They presented documents proving that he was still conspiring to kill Sung. When Tian Shu came to visit the emperor, however, instead of locking him up, Sung honored him. He also gave him a package, which he told the former king to open when he was halfway home. And Shu opened the bundle on his return journey and saw that it contained all the papers documenting his conspiracy. He realized that Sung knew of his murderous plans, yet had spared him nonetheless. This generosity won him over, and he too became one of Sung's most loyal vassals. A Chinese proverb likens friends to the jaws and teeth of a ferocious beast. If you're not cautious, you'll find yourself being devoured. Emperor Sung was well aware of the dangers he faced when he ascended the throne. His friends in the army would tear him apart, and if he managed to escape them, his friends in the government would finish the job. Emperor Sung wanted nothing to do with such friends. He cleverly bribed his fellow generals with magnificent estates, sending them far away. This was a far better way to weaken them than killing them, which would only incite other generals to seek revenge. Sung also kept friendly ministers at arm's length. More often than not, they ended up drinking his infamous cup of poison wine. Instead of relying on friends, Sung cleverly used his enemies, one by one, turning them into far more dependable subjects. While a friend expects more and more favors and seethes with jealousy, these former enemies expected nothing and received everything. A man suddenly spared from execution is immensely grateful and will go to the ends of the earth for the one who pardoned him. In time, these former enemies became Sung's most loyal friends, and Sung was finally able to break the pattern of coups, violence, and civil war. The Sung dynasty ruled China for more than 300 years. Keys to power. It is natural to turn to your friends in times of need. The world can be a harsh and unforgiving place, and friends provide a welcome refuge from its cruelties. Besides, you know your friends well. Why rely on a stranger when you have a friend at hand? The trouble is, you often do not know your friends as well as you think. Friends tend to agree with each other to avoid conflict. They hide their unpleasant traits to prevent causing offense. They laugh heartily at each other's jokes, even when they aren't funny. Since honesty rarely strengthens friendship, you may never know how a friend truly feels. Friends will say they love your poetry, adore your music, and envy your taste in clothes. Perhaps they mean it, but often they do not. When you decide to hire a friend, you gradually uncover the qualities they have kept hidden. Strangely enough, your act of kindness can upset the balance. People want to feel they deserve their good fortune. Receiving a favor can become oppressive. It implies you have been chosen because you are a friend, not necessarily because you are deserving. There is almost a hint of condescension in hiring friends that secretly vexes them. The injury will slowly reveal itself. A little more honesty, flashes of resentment and envy here and there, and before you know, your friendship fades. The more favors and gifts you give to revive the friendship, the less gratitude you receive. Ingratitude has a long and storied history. It has shown its powers for so many centuries that it is truly astonishing that people still underestimate it. It is better to be cautious. If you never expect gratitude from a friend, you will be pleasantly surprised when they do prove grateful. The problem with using or hiring friends is that it will inevitably limit your power. The friend is rarely the one most capable of helping you. In the end, skill and competence are far more important than friendly feelings. Michael III had a man right under his nose who would have guided him wisely and kept him alive. That man was Bardas. In any working situation, it is essential to maintain a certain distance between individuals. The primary aim is to accomplish tasks, not to make friends. Friendliness, whether genuine or feigned, can obscure this goal. The key to power lies in the ability to discern who is best suited to advance your interests in any given situation. Keep friends for friendship, but collaborate with those who are skilled and competent. Your enemies, however, are an untapped gold mine that you must learn to exploit. Take the case of Talleyrand, Napoleon's foreign minister. In 1807, realizing that Napoleon was leading France to ruin, Talleyrand decided it was time to turn against him. But conspiring against the emperor was fraught with danger. He needed a partner, a confederate. What friend could he trust with such a perilous project? He chose Joseph Fouché, head of the secret police, his most hated enemy, a man who had even tried to have him assassinated. Talleyrand knew that their former hatred would pave the way for an emotional reconciliation. Fouché would expect nothing from him and would strive to prove himself worthy of Talleyrand's choice. A person with something to prove can move mountains. Furthermore, Talleyrand understood that their relationship would be based on mutual self-interest, not tainted by personal feelings. This selection proved perfect. Although the conspirators did not succeed in toppling Napoleon, the union of such powerful but unlikely partners generated considerable interest in the cause, and opposition to the emperor slowly spread. From then on, Talleyrand and Fouché had a fruitful working relationship. Whenever possible, bury the hatchet with an enemy and make a point of putting them in your service. As Lincoln said, "You destroy an enemy when you make a friend of him." In 1971, during the Vietnam War, Henry Kissinger was the target of an unsuccessful kidnapping attempt involving, among others, the renowned anti-war activist priests, the Berrigan brothers. In private, without informing the Secret Service or the Justice Department, Kissinger arranged a Saturday morning meeting with 3 of the alleged kidnappers. He explained to his guests that he would have most American soldiers out of Vietnam by mid-1972, completely charming them. They gave him some "Kidnap Kissinger" buttons, and one of them remained a friend of his for years, visiting him on several occasions. This was not just a one-time ploy. Kissinger made it a policy to work with those who disagreed with him. Colleagues noted that he seemed to get along better with his enemies than with his friends. "Without enemies around us, we grow lazy. An enemy at our heels sharpens our wits, keeping us focused and alert. It is sometimes better, then, to use enemies as enemies rather than transforming them into friends or allies." Mao Zedong saw conflict as key to his approach to power. In 1937, when the Japanese invaded China, interrupting the civil war between Mao's communists and their enemy, the nationalists, some communist leaders advocated leaving the nationalists to fight the Japanese, using the time to recuperate. Mao disagreed. The Japanese could not possibly defeat and occupy a vast country like China for long. Once they left, the communists would have grown rusty if they had been out of combat for several years and would be ill-prepared to reopen their struggle with the nationalists. To fight a formidable foe like the Japanese would be the perfect training for the communist ragtag army. Mao's plan was adopted, and it worked. By the time the Japanese finally retreated, the communists had gained the fighting experience that helped them defeat the nationalists. Years later, a Japanese visitor tried to apologize to Mao for his country's invasion of China. Mao interrupted. "Should I not thank you instead?" "Without a worthy opponent," he explained, "a man or group cannot grow stronger." Mao's strategy of constant conflict has several key components. First, be certain that in the long run, you will emerge victorious. Never pick a fight with someone you are not sure you can defeat, as Mao knew the Japanese would be defeated in time. Second, if you have no apparent enemies, you must sometimes set up a convenient target, even turning a friend into an enemy. Mao used this tactic repeatedly in politics. Third, use such enemies to define your cause more clearly to the public, framing it as a struggle of good against evil. Mao encouraged China's disagreements with the Soviet Union and the United States. Without clear-cut enemies, he believed, his people would lose any sense of what Chinese communism meant. A sharply defined enemy is a far stronger argument for your side than all the words you could possibly put together. Never let the presence of enemies upset or distress you. You are far better off with a declared opponent or two than not knowing where your real enemies lie. The man of power welcomes conflict, using enemies to enhance his reputation as a sure-footed fighter who can be relied upon in times of uncertainty. Image: the jaws of ingratitude. Knowing what would happen if you put a finger in the mouth of a lion, you would stay clear of it. With friends you will have no such caution, and if you hire them, they will eat you alive with ingratitude. Authority: know how to use enemies for your own profit. You must learn to grab a sword not by its blade, which would cut you, but by the handle, which allows you to defend yourself. The wise man profits more from his enemies than a fool from his friends. Reversal: although it is generally unwise to mix work with friendship, there are occasions when a friend can be more useful than an enemy. A man of power often has unpleasant tasks to be done, and it is usually better to have others do these deeds for him. Friends, driven by their affection, are often willing to take such risks. Additionally, if things go awry, a friend can serve as a convenient scapegoat. This fall of the favorite was a tactic often employed by kings and sovereigns. They would let their closest confidant take the blame for a mistake, as the public would not suspect them of sacrificing a friend on purpose. Naturally, after using a friend in this way, you lose their loyalty forever. Therefore, it is best to use this scapegoat role for someone close, but not too close. The issue with working alongside friends is that it blurs the necessary boundaries and distances required for effective collaboration. However, if both parties understand the risks involved, a friend can be employed to great effect. Nevertheless, you must remain vigilant, always on guard for any signs of emotional disturbance such as envy and ingratitude. In the treacherous realm of power, nothing is stable, and even the dearest of friends can become the most dangerous of enemies.